Hey everybody, Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of our RANT series. Today we've got something I've been thinking about for a little while. The topic of today's show is all about stinker albums released by bands you love or from classic bands. So you know how it goes. Not every band can release a winner or a gem time after time after time. And in the history of most bands, especially like the more popular bands, you're going to release a turkey every now and then, right? But what are some of the most notable ones? I'm going to talk about some of the ones that have always been pretty notable for me. A lot of these that I'm going to talk about are bands that I love and have followed my whole life, but you know what? They pumped out a crapper once in a while, or in some cases maybe once. Some of them might have a few, but these are the most notable ones that I can think of. So in a lot of cases you get disappointed, right? Because you're waiting for that new release, and then it comes out and you're like, what the fuck is this? This is not the band that I know and love, right? It happens. It's hard to be consistent if you're a band over the course of your entire career. Every so often, you're going to release an album that maybe is not going to, kind of really stick too well with the audiences. So let's just kind of start. Again, no real order here. I just kind of grabbed some stuff off the shelf, some kind of notable choices, I think. All right, so this first band, this is not probably the worst offender of their stinkers, because quite frankly they have a handful of them, but some of them I got rid of. I decided not to keep because they're so bad. I'm talking about Queensryche. This is Operation Mindcrime 2. Obviously a very pale imitation to the first Operation Mindcrime. Did it ever really need a sequel? I don't think so, but the problem was Queensryche, the band, were like scuffling so bad for a handful of years that they figure, well, you know what? Let's try and recapture some of the glory from the past by doing a sequel to Operation Mindcrime, and it didn't really work at all. This is just a kind of unfocused album, not catchy and memorable like the classic original concept album, but quite frankly, the couple albums they released before this are pretty damn bad too. It's like everything they did post Promised Land up until Tate leaving the band was just, in my opinion, just not good at all. And I don't consider this good either. And obviously we know the whole history of Queensryche. Since then, Tate's gone on his own. The band got a new singer, and the rest is history. But Operation Mindcrime 2, yeah, not very good. Okay, I might get a little flack for this one, but I really don't care, because I personally don't like this album, never liked this album. I've really tried to like this album because it's a major, major classic band, but I just find this a boring, turgid mess. I'm talking about The Final Cut by Pink Floyd. I know there's people who love this album, but man, this is just like depressing Roger Waters drivel. There's just nothing exciting about this album. It just kind of meanders along like, the band had been shooting up and just kind of going through the motions. Again, some people like it for its moodiness, but this just, I don't know, compared to like all the Pink Floyd stuff that came before, I just find this sounds like a band going through the motions, Waters wanting to do something else, kind of on a different page from the rest of the band. And I don't get it, don't like it. I've tried for decades, folks. I know some of you out there love this, and you're going to be like, well, you're not a true Pink Floyd fan. Well, I am a Pink Floyd fan. This is no good. All right? Sue me. Okay. With this band, I couldn't figure out if I wanted to choose this one that I pulled out or Music from the Elder. Of course, I'm talking about Kiss. Unmasked is just the beginning of a downturn for the band Kiss. Music from the Elder, I at least give them credit for trying to do something different on a grander scale. It didn't work, but man, this album is just not good. This is Kiss just in complete disarray. Lord only knows who actually plays on this album. I'm sure you'll get a different answer from anybody you talk to. The songs just aren't really good. Just aren't really good. Kiss trying to kind of move into the 80s and do this pop thing, it just did not work. Did not work. Another album that just really didn't work. And I've always wanted to really like this album because I love this band, but again, a band that was just kind of a little bit in disarray, not really sure where they wanted to be. Talking about Kansas in the spirit of things. You got Steve Morse's last album with the band. Power was great. Morse's debut with the band. Power was a really good album. They returned fairly quickly with this, but this just very poppy. Nothing like the typical classic Kansas sound on here. Other than some Morse guitar playing, really not much else to recommend here. Again, a band that was just kind of going through the motion, trying to figure out where the hell they were in the late 80s, and it just didn't work. Just did not work. All right, this one. So, talked about this one on our Black Sabbath History of show, and Chris Allen and I both talked in great detail about how we do not like this album. And in fact, a couple of you made some comments on that video saying that I can't be a true Sabbath fan, or we couldn't be true Sabbath fans if we don't like Never Say Die. I hate to tell you, I am a Black Sabbath fan for about 40 years. Okay, I love the band to death, always have. And I've talked to plenty of people over the years who are big-time Sabbath fans who do not like this album. Granted, there's plenty of you out there who do. More power to you, okay? But I just don't like this album. This is a weak album. This is a band splintering at the seams, going through the motions, okay? They just cranked out an album just to put an album out, and you can tell, you know, come on. You can't tell me that this album even closely compares to Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Master of Reality, Volume 4, okay, Sabotage, even Technical Ecstasy, which was a step down from there. So, you know what? 2 or 3 halfway decent tunes, but on the whole, I just think this is a big misfire. Doesn't really work at all. If you love it, hey, great. Continue loving it, okay? But you're not going to convince me that this is a great album, because it isn't. At the time, and it's probably, in my opinion, one of the 2 weakest Black Sabbath albums ever released, along with Forbidden. So I stand by that. Okay, another band I love to death, but man, I just have not been able to get into this album at all for the decades that I've tried. I'm talking about Jethro Tull, Under Wraps. This is Tull trying to be electronic, trying to be modern. You know, we're in the 80s. We're going to use lots of electronic drums and synths and what have you. And man, just took all the mystique out of the sales of Jethro Tull. There's just really nothing good about this album. I avoid it like the plague. I own it. But, you know, if I could name, there's 15 tracks on here, which is way too many. All right, that's X number 1. But, you know, going through the track list, you know, Lap of Luxury, that's okay. You know, Radio Free Moscow, whatever, Paparazzi, just not memorable songs, not very good. There's almost no guitar on here. There's no flute on here. It's like Ian Anderson and a bunch of electronic drums and synths. No good. And that's from a band that I love everything else they do. All right. How about Helloween? All right. Chameleon. Again, this is a band that, you know, the Keeper of the Seven Keys albums, for God's sakes. I mean, great albums, power metal kings. And then they released this piece of crap. Again, an album, a couple halfway decent tunes, but for the most part, just not good, boring, poppy, okay? This is not power metal. Eesh, no good. Another kind of similar situation, okay? Monday Morning Apocalypse by Evergrey. You know, a band that was riding high with a whole host of really, really great songs. And great albums, I should say. And then they put this out, just not a very good album. Again, not awful, but definitely not very good. And thankfully, they would rebound, and they've been putting out one killer album after another since then. But this is just a complete step down from all the albums that came before it. All right. Nazareth, okay? Love them to death. I mean, look at all those great albums in the 70s. You know, arguably you could say those first couple albums they released, you know, 2XS comes to mind in the early 80s. You know, a little more mainstream sound, right, compared to the gritty, bluesy hard rock that they did throughout the 70s, but still good, a lot of good tracks. But then, man, they put out this album in 1984, The Catch. All right, first of all, the terrible cover, right? And then you look at the back, and there's the guys dressed in baseball uniform, you know, looking like they're going out to play some softball or whatever. Like, what is this? And this album is just like, you know, like Nazareth trying to be like Bryan Adams. It's just like kind of wimpy. Nothing against Bryan Adams, wrote a lot of great songs, but you know, do we want Nazareth to be like a wimpy pop ballad band with all sorts of synths and no like kind of heavy guitar? No. And this is just an epic fail. And this is one of the reasons why my Nazareth just kind of disappeared through much of the 80s. They kept putting out albums. Nobody was buying them because they just started along these lines. They would kind of redeem themselves a little bit later in the decade, but by then I think people had already checked out, which is a shame. But, man, yeah, this is a misfire. Misfire. All right. Yeah, I mean, this album for me is a stinker. It's bland, it's boring, it's poppy, it's just not, yes, open your eyes. I just can never get into this album. Just, you look through the track list and nothing stands out, for me anyway. And granted, I know there are going to be some Yes fans out there like, oh, well, whatever. That's cool. If you like it, great. I just don't like this. Never liked it. What do we got? John Anderson, Steve Howe, Billy Sherwood, Chris Squire, and Alan White. I saw him on this tour. Like a little lackluster, but not bad, because of course they played a lot of old stuff, because nobody's going to sit through this crap. But I just could never get into this album. This is just Yes light, and just didn't work. Did not work. All right, ELP, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Love Beach. Of course, you knew I had to talk about this one. The funny thing is, this album really isn't as bad as we all remember it back in the day, but still, considering all the greatness that came before it, it's pretty terrible. God, ELP doing poppy ballads, generic rock tunes just does not work. All I Want Is You, Love Beach, Taste of My Love, The Gambler's pretty cool, Canario's pretty cool. For You, The Memoirs of an Austrian Gentleman is pretty cool, but it's just so ELP light. All the bombast is gone. It's just like, a band that just we're ready to just pack it in. So got to be included in this show. All right, perhaps the single worst album that I'm going to talk about today. It's just amazing how bad this album, how bad it was back then, and how it's even worse today. I listened to this recently and I was like, God, what were they thinking? Hot Space by Queen. This is a band that were on top of the world. They released the Game album and they were bigger than ever. And then they come out with this piece of garbage. Literally, is there any songs on here that are any good? Put Out the Fire probably is the only good song on here. And then, well, of course, Under Pressure is great. But that was kind of like a single that they threw on the album. But, Put Out the Fire is a cranking tune. The rest of it is just this bizarre white man funk that just does not work at all. There's like nothing redeemable about this album. Ugh, get rid of it. All right, I'm sure this album's got a lot of fans, and quite frankly, it's somewhat of a fun album. But again, I just think compared to all the albums that came before it, and even after it, this album to me just has always seemed like, let's just throw some shit together, release it, it'll sell millions, and everybody will be happy. And as the decades have gone by, I just look at this album in just kind of negative light. I'm talking about Diver Down by Van Halen. Again, a lot of you probably love this, and granted, there's some fun stuff on here, but it's like mostly covers and some instrumentals and just tunes that just really, I don't know, it's a short album. It's what is it, like 25, 30 minutes tops. For me, this is, if you talk about classic Van Halen, this isn't it. Okay, this, like I said, was just an excuse for the band to fulfill. They owed the label a record. They threw this together. There's a lot better Van Halen than this. There's also some, a couple of the Sammy albums are kind of hit or miss. And then, of course, that one they did with Gary Cherone is pretty terrible, too. But, I don't know, for me, this is just such a disappointment because it's, just such a come down from the stuff that came before it. All right, something a little more recent. Now, this is a band that I respect a lot. I love them to death. I've seen them live more than any other band. And I've tried so hard to get into this album. And I know the band had a lot of aspirations to really go out and release something epic. And I give them full credit for that. But man, this just doesn't work. Were we 2 years after its release? Or is it 3? 2 or 3? 2, I think it's 2. Still can't get into it. Saw them play this live. I was bored out of my mind, and I never thought I'd say it. I never thought I would say that I'd be bored at a Dream Theater concert. But man, the Astonishing, way too long, way too convoluted. Most of the tracks, again, it's a concept album, so it's like a whole story. Labrie singing multiple parts, different characters. The problem is it's just way too long. Most of the tracks just aren't very memorable. It just doesn't work. Even the musical passages really, they're not Dream Theater-ish. This is not your typical Dream Theater album. I get what they wanted to do here, but for me, it just doesn't work. It doesn't move me. I was hoping going to see it live would change my impression of it, and in fact, it only made it worse. I found it a real chore to sit through an entire show of this. And, will I ever revisit this? It's sitting up on the shelf in the D section, and I've had no desire to reach for it again. I've tried. Just don't like it. I don't think it works. All right, Uriah Heep. I had two choices for Heep. The Equinox album, which came out in the mid-'80s, is not a very good album. It was very slick and 80s produced and just kind of far away from that classic Heep sound. Too many synths and, drums, electronic drums and what have you. But a couple memorable tunes, a couple decent tunes. A bit more than I can say for this album, the Conquest album, which, again, this kind of signaled the breakup of the band right around 1980, 80 or 81, I think this came out. And, Ken Hensley by this time had enough. They brought in John Sloman on vocals, and he kind of really wasn't a good fit. And the band were just going through the motions. The writing wasn't there, and, really no memorable songs on here. It's just not a very good Uriah Heep album. As a cursory listen, yeah, it's okay, but man, easily the worst Uriah Heep album released. Okay, speaking of the worst album released by a great band, this is terrible. This is Renaissance Camera. Okay, reduced to a trio, just accepting all the nonsense new wave and electronic pop of the 80s and going far away from the classic Renaissance sound. Yeah, this is not good. Not good at all. If you're expecting, Scheherazade and Mother Russia and all that kind of stuff, forget it. You're not getting it here. A bunch of, fairly quickish pop songs. As a pop album, I guess it's not terrible. It's a stretch. As a Renaissance album, it's pretty bad. Again, one of those albums that I probably never have any use for to listen to. Again, I own it, but that's about it. Okay. Now, there's going to be a lot of people going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. Okay. There's a trio of Rush albums that I really don't like too much. I can't say I hate any of them, but I really have no use to ever listen to them. I'm talking about those kind of late 80s albums, right? Hold Your Fire. It was either between this and Presto. Presto at least has one or two really good songs. The rest of it's just kind of boring. I just really don't like Hold Your Fire much. It's just, and again, I used to like it back in the day. It just has not aged well. It sounds very dated, and it's just so poppy and so lightweight for Rush. Granted, a couple good tunes. Force 10 is pretty good. Mission is kind of like a pleasant tune, memorable. But man, I don't know. I just have found that over the years, I just don't really have a lot of use for this. And for me, it's just, when you look at the whole, now that Rush has officially retired, you look at the whole Rush canon, right? This just doesn't hold up well to a lot of their other tunes. I mean, a lot of their other albums. For me, it qualifies as a stinker, folks. All right. Yeah, this one. You talk about a stinker of an album by a great band, and this is a great band. Again, some of you, who have more kind of mainstream taste may not know much about this band but I'm a huge fan. And when this album came out, it was just such a letdown. It's such a weak album, and especially compared to the greatness that came before. I'm talking about Gentle Giant, Giant for a Day. This is just not good. Does anybody want to hear Gentle Giant playing quirky pop rock? No. When you think of everything that came before it, I mean, just Three Friends, Octopus, Acquiring the Taste, all those great albums, and then this, In a Glass House, and then this. Again, one or two okay tunes. The rest is just bland poppy drivel. Sorry, Gentle Giant. I love everything else you've ever done. Don't like that. And the last for the day, okay? And again, This album, for a lot of people, is just awful. Some people love it. I admit I like a couple tracks, but for the most part, I think this was an epic fail at the time. Probably, probably the decades have softened my dislike for this a bit. It's got some good moments, but I'm talking about Kilroy Was Here by Styx. Just a corny album. But it's got heavy metal poisoning because, of course, JY has got to save the day on at least one tune, right? Mr. Roboto, love it or hate it. A lot of ballads and just not a very good album. It's just, I think, I understand where Dennis DeYoung wanted to go with this, but it just kind of really didn't work. And, again, time has been a little better on this album, but I still think if you're looking at the entire Styx catalog, you have to look at that album and say, ooh, what were they thinking? So, anyway, stinkers from bands you love. That's what we talked about. I'm sure there's more. If you guys love this, I can try and pull out some more because there's plenty of them. But for now, those are the notable ones that come to mind. But we can always do more of this if you like this. If you got some stinkers by bands you love, put it in the comments. Okay, I'd love to read them. Love to hear what albums you hate from bands you love. And if you totally disagree with any of these, let me know. That's fine too. Like I said, it's my opinion. You're welcome to yours as well. So this is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're here on the mighty YouTube. Lots more coming. Again, I'm Pete Pardo. We'll see you real soon. Take care.